The biggest shift is that SEO has moved from being a traffic function into revenue function, like more of the visibility aspect there. A few years ago, success was mostly measured through rankings, traffic, and clicks. But now leadership is asking, are we influencing pipeline? Are we discoverable in AI systems? Are we becoming a trusted authority in our category? Are buyers encountering us during critical decision-making moments? Because increasingly, buyers may never even start on Google now. They might ask ChatGPT, what's the best AI platform for revenue teams? And if you're not consistently part of those conversations, you're invisible during key buying stages. I think that's a much bigger business conversation than ranking alone.
Hello, and welcome back to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm here with my co-host, Ross. And today our guest is Hadassah from Outreach. Hey, how's it going today?
Hi, doing well, Josh. Hi, Ross. Good to see y'all.
Hey there.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. So Hadassah, before we dive in here, can you just kind of get us started with a brief overview of who you are, what you do at Outreach, and can you touch on your backstory a bit too, just to give people a bit of context?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Hadassah Pegado Dalisay. I am originally from Brazil, but I've spent most of my life and career here in the US. Today, I lead content strategy, SEO, and AEO at Outreach. And to give a little bit of context there, Outreach is an agentic AI platform for revenue teams. We help sales and go-to-market teams execute more consistently across the revenue process. So everything from prospecting and buyer engagement to deal management, coaching, forecasting, and revenue intelligence. A big part of that is Outreach AI agents, which acts as a teammate in the revenue team's workflow, taking on busy work from and helping team move from insights to action so sellers can focus more on building relationships and moving deals forward. So my work really sits across content, search, and AI visibility and revenue impact. I've been in the search and growth marketing space for over a decade now, and I started my career closer to the website and digital execution side. So, web design, SEO, paid search, and performance marketing. Uh, Early on, I got to see how these websites and content and technical SEO and user experience and conversion all work together by being a part of an agency and started to move into the in house approach later on when I started working for companies like Auditboard, who I believe now is rebranded as Optro, and Elation before joining Outreach, where I've been able to just go deeper into building long-term content and SEO programs that connect directly to pipeline and revenue.
That's great. Um, it's interesting. Like it feels like SEO, is kind of having a moment again now with a lot of the changes with AI search and that sort of thing. I'm curious, like having been in that world for a while now, what's the biggest shift that you've seen over the past 2 to 3 years in terms of um, how all of that change has impacted the world of SEO?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift is that SEO has moved from being a traffic function into revenue function, like more of the visibility aspect there. A few years ago, success was mostly measured through rankings, traffic, and clicks. But now leadership is asking, are we influencing pipeline? Are we discoverable in AI systems? Are we becoming a trusted authority in our category? Are buyers encountering us during critical decision-making moments? Because increasingly buyers may never even start on Google now. They might ask ChatGPT, what's the best AI platform for revenue teams? And if you're not consistently part of those conversations, you're invisible during key buying stages. I think that's a much bigger business conversation than ranking alone.
I'm curious as a follow up there, like those things that were very measurable in the past, right? Like traffic and clicks and then through to conversion rate and ultimately revenue or sales. Um, Now it sounds like you're saying that SEO is kind of just getting closer to the revenue piece, right? It's influencing that transaction, but without those sort of proxy metrics in between. Like, are you able to like attribute that revenue to those SEO efforts or to those AEO efforts directly?
Yeah, I think it's still super early, but I believe that with the influence that AI visibility is giving SEO now even more, I think there's still like correlation between the two, where even though you're not able to really uh, pinpoint exactly what's going on, you're able to kind of have it measured towards your business objectives. So a lot of the times, I think it's taken away engagement signal and looking at it from an influence type of signal. So that's like looking at your brand mentions, seeing how well you're being positioned in that sense, and really showcasing how you're being referenced from like LLM traffic referrals, things like that. That I believe is the best way to kind of pinpoint it back to revenue and give it its what's the right word here? I think it's giving its like footprint to revenue in that sense.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just to kind of piggyback off that last question, SEO used to be all about the keywords, and it was like if you got enough keywords, short tail, long tail, like you were gonna win. And it was just a matter of like, how do you kind of put the jigsaw puzzle pieces together? And if you covered enough surface area, you were gonna win eventually. Now, I think a lot of the approach comes down to proper context, and also the consistency of the context in which you're showing up. Um, can you walk us through like how you're leading efforts internally when it comes to AI search, and like how you're positioning the shift to those who maybe don't have the same SEO background that you have?
Yeah, I think the conversation now with everyone, it's really centered around the visibility, authority, and execution process. So like pipeline quality, revenue influence, AI visibility. I think how content supports the broader go to market motion. For example, with outreach specifically, one thing we've invested heavily is in our outreach insights group, which we call it OIG. And it's a proprietary revenue insights initiative where we combine anonymized like platform level data with internal research to understand how revenue teams actually work, where AI is impacting productivity, and what patterns separate top performers from everyone else. So when we think about content or AI visibility, we're not just looking at, like you said, the keywords here anymore. We're looking at revenue team workflows, buyer questions, productivity signals, forecasting challenges, and how AI is reshaping execution itself. I think that's where the industry is headed overall. So I think SEO is becoming that connection, like connective layer between inbound AI discovery and buyer education. So it's moving away from that old model that was all around like creating content and just ranking for keywords and driving traffic.
Can you unpack that a little bit more in terms of how you see the role of SEO within inbound marketing strategy now? Like, how has that changed with some of these shifts?
I think, like I said, it's really around like that connective layer between the two. So I truly believe that companies that are winning right now are building interconnected like content ecosystems instead of isolated like blog posts. And because AI search is conversational, the focus has really also shifted towards understanding the real buyer language and operational questions rather than just targeting keywords. AI is compressing the buyer journey into a single interface. So a buyer can now move from awareness to vendor valuation inside of, let's say, ChatGPT, of having one conversation there. So when it comes to how content is supported and how SEO is working together with AEO, it comes down to there's still the fundamentals and the traditional type of values that SEO provides, like making sure your content has that authority, is trustworthy, but it's also connecting it to the way that the LLMs are synthesizing the pieces. So every section, every piece of anything you're pushing out there onto your website needs to connect with the answer. It needs to really address what those queries are that are more intentional for questions rather than just a keyword itself. So it's I feel like they both kind of work together. You can't really look at them isolated in that sense. It needs to be a kind of a junction type of a strategy.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, one of the biggest shifts that we've seen in terms of what's working, and also what we've seen other folks point to and say this is really helping, is shifting to more of the bottom funnel content. I think a lot of companies, when SEO was the way it was for so long, they over-indexed on top of funnel content, and now found themselves, or in the last 3 years, so they found themselves having to kind of fill the gap in the bottom of the funnel, and in some cases, some of the middle of the funnel as well. And that kind of touches on what we were talking about earlier about like the old approach of just like spray and pray and just making sure you get the keywords, or like that's what people did. How, and maybe this builds off your last answer, but like um, how does that track with your content strategy and how you're shifting internally at outreach, and where might there be some more nuance here? Because it's not as simple as just like, oh, for 20 years, tofu worked, and now the future is just bofu. It's not that simple, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the biggest shifts for us has been moving away from like, that keyword research approach and looking at more from a behavioral language type of research. So what we do is we analyze like sales call transcripts, for example, or customer conversation webinars or community discussions, Reddit threads, and even like just AI prompts to understand how revenue teams naturally describe problems and ask questions. Then we use AI strategically there to help synthesize those patterns at scale, and I think the real test isn't really traffic or the publishing cadence. It's is the content actually changing behavior? Are sellers using it? Are buyers moving faster because of this? And then are leaders making better decisions? So, in my thought process in terms of like my job is to make sure content doesn't just scale, but it earns its place in the revenue engine. And a lot of the times, you are going to have to still break down your content into like top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel because when someone's having a conversation with these AI bots or AI tools, they are basically asking all of these conversations at once. And these AI tools are basically giving you all those answers as well. And if you don't have content to support each stage of that, the buyer's journey, you're really going to not be the solution to their answers. So I think it comes down to really understanding your audience first, understanding your ICPs before starting to just work on content for the sake of creating content for volume purposes.
What are some of the bigger mistakes that you see people make in that world of like crafting their content strategy?
Yeah, I honestly feel like the biggest mistake is still creating content around keywords instead of the operational relevance. So there's a lot of generic AI content right now because companies are just optimizing for volume instead of authority. But AI systems increasingly reward like clarity, specificity, expertise, and usefulness. So I really think companies that are standing out are building content around like real workflows challenges rather than just like here and there what they think should be the case, but really around like the operational pain points and differentiated expertise. And and one thing that becomes even more valuable in an AI driven world is proprietary insights, because if everyone can generate content with AI, unique perspectives and real operational expertise becomes the real differentiator. So that's kind of what we're doing with Outreach. We're really focusing on our Outreach Insights group, which is our research team, and we really look towards like our own data to create content that's valuable and also can be replicated because it's coming from us.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear kind of some of the real world examples there of like how is outreach doing in this shift, and like how do you see the impact of some of your efforts? Like, what are the bigger wins that you've had at outreach from an AI search perspective?
We've been very intentional about aligning our messaging and content ecosystem around clear narratives. So, Outreach is an agentic AI platform for revenue teams. And a big focus has been creating content around real revenue workflows and operational challenges, not just product features, and making sure that it's true to what we're trying to project with our own ICPs. So internally, we're customer zero for many of these workflows. We actively use AI powered research and synthesis to identify recurring buyer questions, operational themes, and workflow friction points across conversations and GTM signals. So that allows us to build content around those exact questions revenue teams are actively trying to solve.
I love how a couple of those things, like, I love how you're thinking about content as an ecosystem. I think that's such a interesting mental model shift from the old paradigm, which I think in SEO it was all about kind of you could kind of build stairways to nowhere and have landing pages that attracted traffic, and it was fine. And if you wanted to abandon that at some point, you could, but like now all that stuff comes at a cost, right? To the clarity of the LLMs understanding you and all that stuff, all that old positioning or whatever it is. Um, and I think it's a really cool tactical idea that you all use the sales transcripts specifically to understand the language that buyers are using, because that's got to reflect, the types of prompts. Because I think that's one of the big questions in AI search is like it was really easy to optimize around keywords based on volume. Like that was, data that we had access to, and it was like easy to solve for that. But now it's like we don't know what people are asking or what directions conversations are taking. And so you're just sort of guessing what you're optimizing for. And I think that using the customer's actual words is a pretty good approximation of like how to create some meaningful content. That's really cool.
Yeah. I appreciate that. No, I agree because I feel like at the end of the day, you want to reflect what your ICPs are thinking through, what they're struggling with, and make sure that you're the solution to their problem. Especially when it comes to these tools, they're going to reference and retrieve and synthesize content that really will answer to those questions. So as long as you can really reframe your content so that it's being helpful and being actually trustworthy and credible, you're gonna win in the AI game. I honestly believe that.
Kind of another way of thinking about this, or maybe um, the other side of the coin here is I'm always curious to understand where people see like the missed opportunity, like I think most people have, especially practitioners, not, the people that just do thought leadership content and it's very surface level, but like actually hands-on practitioners, um, they have a good sense of what is working for them. And they also have a sense of maybe what some niche things are that every company could be doing. Like, what are you seeing right now? And I don't want to like give away your secret sauce or like give your direct competition like the keys to the castle here. Like, what do you think is like one of the biggest opportunities right now that people are taking for granted when it comes to improving their AI search results? And you can't say Reddit because that's what everyone's the last like 3 years, right?
Yeah. No, I think, honestly, for this question, it's really around like content architecture and operational intelligence. Because at the end of the day, everyone's talking about AI generated volume. Very few companies are investing in connected topic ecosystems, buyer journey orchestration, and then authority reinforcements, and even signal driven content strategy. The future of content strategy is becoming much more signal driven than keyword driven. And the teams investing in real thought leadership and depth right now are going to have a real advantage because AI surfaces answers, but it cites sources that say something worth saying. So that's where I feel like a lot of companies are not invested in this because they're trying to find the quick wins. And with them trying to do that, they're not looking at the bigger picture that is actually showcasing your operational intelligence, what you're doing differently.
Say more about signal driven content strategy. Like where are you looking for that signal?
Yeah, so that comes from, like, the transcripts and, like, being really, intentional with the research that you're doing, the insights that you're pulling from your actual customer base. I think that's really what's gonna help you create content that's signal driven because you're really getting those insights from your ICPs, from the customers who are really vetting you, trying to figure out if you're worth their time. So really pulling from those transcripts, getting answers and questions from those transcripts, it's really where you're going to be able to provide content and utilize what you have from your proprietary data to showcase your difference in your approach compared to your competitors.
I'm curious, I've seen some of the things that you've written and talked about, like in, really valuing the craft in content creation and, real storytelling and that sort of thing. I'm curious, we're aligned on that. I'm curious where you're introducing AI into those workflows, like Gen AI, to help create, obviously not, sort of the volume play that you've um, positioned against, but like, are there useful ways to integrate that into your workflows that you guys have seen success with?
Yeah, I think what's actually working is using AI as like a thinking partner early in the process. So, synthesizing research, gut checking direction, analyzing that conversational patterns, and just surfacing recurring buyer questions and just identifying content opportunities faster. So, that's where it genuinely saves time and improves the quality. I think what feels gimmicky or what felt gimmicky was just using it to just produce drafts faster. Speed without strategy really doesn't help anyone. The strategic layer is still matters enormously, and AI helps just accelerate the execution, but it doesn't replace the positioning, the buyer understanding, and narrative development or judgment even. So it helps you. It's like your teammate, and it's there to support you in the workflow, but it shouldn't be the final say in what you're doing and what you're publishing.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of build that out further, how are you all using AI in your workflows? And um, how long did it take for you all to kind of, through trial and error, figure out something that did work versus like, hey, this is novel, but like the output doesn't results?
Research and buyer intelligence workflows, easily those are the 2. what used to take like days manually, like reviewing transcripts and webinars, community conversations, and just customer feedback can now happen much faster through AI assisted synthesis. So that's really where we're spending the most time in terms of having AI help us out in the workflow process. That just freed up the team to spend more time on strategy and narrative development, buyer psychology, and just the ecosystem building as well. So really, instead of spending all of our time manually aggregating everything, all that information, we didn't get there all at once. It was like definitely gradual, and it started with like low stakes tasks and expanding from there. But it was really from like the process of really researching and just getting that workflow going so that we can spend more time strategizing and thinking about the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish.
Can we get into the weeds a little bit on kind of the aggregation comment you shared there? Like you mentioned taking your call transcripts and using that as basically intel for your content creation. I love that idea. We've done something very similar. Um, Curious, like how what does that batching process look like? Are you taking like a week's worth of calls, a month's worth of calls? Like, and how often are you refreshing your content to reflect the conversations you're having? Or was it more of like we did this one time, it changed the nature of our content because we saw what people were actually talking to us about, and we haven't had to do it ever since? Like, can you just kind of walk us through not only the process of doing that initially, but also what maybe the maintenance of that looks like?
Yeah, so at first it was like a first I did it myself just to try to figure out how this works and how I could even like get answers, get questions from these transcripts. And then from that point on, I was able to find really great questions that I feel like were never utilized. And I basically chatted with my team and spoke to our overall growth marketing team about this process. They were excited. And now we do it on a quarterly basis where basically we batch like a certain amount depending on our ACPs. We'll break it down based on the personas, and we will batch from there and ask like Claude or Jasper or we even have like a research agent within our outreach tool where we ask questions like, what are the repeated questions you're seeing from said audience or a said persona? And then from that point on, we start to see like if there's relevancy in terms of the questions and start mapping it out from that perspective. And from the early stages when I first did this, went back old school and did like a 3 by 4 grid on like spreadsheet and had like our personas at the top and then all of the buyer's journeys at the side, really just like awareness, evaluation, all of that stuff, just to make sure that we're making content that would answer all of these questions at once and creating content specifically for that. So that's kind of been our workflow, and we maintain that. And it's been just successful in that sense because we're able to kind of capitalize on it and continue to build off of what's working. So that's kind of like the flow. We try to do it every quarter to make sure that we're not missing out on anything.
I'm curious if there are ways that you are not yet using AI, but that you're curious about or that you think your team should be. Are there areas that you want to push into?
I'd say one area I'd love to see us use AI more for is content retros and like feedback loops in a way. We already use AI across like research and synthesis and strategy, but I think the next level is using it around like after content goes live because I feel like at that point we kind of just, oh, it's live, great, we'll see the efforts of our sweat here. But I think after a campaign, a report, or major content lot, AI could really help us look across like performance signals and ask like what worked, what didn't, what showed up in AI answers, what influenced pipeline, what did sales actually use, and where are buyers still getting stuck. So I feel like having that kind of retro would be great because we're still doing it kind of manually, and I feel like getting everybody on board in terms of like marketing on board with that would be a great way to utilize it too.
Yeah, speaking of getting people on board for AI, like what has AI adoption been like as a company? Like that's one of the hardest things I think for folks to get right. And I think it's easier for startups to get this right than legacy companies for obvious reasons. But like when you all saw these changes coming in the market and just in terms of how people were changing behaviors, like what did it look like to not just get yourself using them? It seems like you kind of keep, a tab on what's changing and how you need to stay relevant. But like in terms of the organization as a whole, and maybe the team specifically, like what did it look like to get people all working together? And in a way that doesn't feel fragmented and each person's kind of their own island in terms of AI usage?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the overall objectives of what you're trying to accomplish and how AI can basically be like a teammate or a helpful partner during the workflow. So with our company, adoption came from like testing things out, seeing how people would actually utilize it, and being able to share the outcomes from those usages. And with us, for example, the content team, we basically were the first ones to try to use it, and from that point on, we were able to show our wins based off the amount and the type of content we were creating, and that kind of sparked everyone's interest of figuring out, like, how can we be more efficient with AI and not see it as this, like, monster with crazy legs, like, it's actually there to help you rather than replace you. So, I think once we started to showcase that, it was easier to get leadership buy-in, it was easier to just explain the like evangelize it in a way because people started to see that it's there to support your process, it's there to actually be a part of the workflow rather than just replace everything that you're trying to do. But adoption, it's we're still, I feel like our marketing team is getting on board with it even more, and we're just trying to find ways to utilize it and showcase the actual wins because it could be a little difficult to do that at first. It's very still new, but and everyone's talking about it, so it's just that kind of a that flow.
One thing that I'd love to touch on here too is just the continued role that SEO plays in things. I know that a lot of our questions here have been oriented around AI search and AI, but if you look at the data, like search usage, traditional search usage is not going away. It's actually still growing in a pretty healthy way. And I'm curious, like as someone with a rich background in SEO, who's also looked to, I don't know if reinvent yourself is the right way to put it, but you've looked to figure out, like, how do we adapt and adjust course based on how technology is changing, how buyer behaviors are changing. Like, how do you get that right without it being at the expense? And how do you approach the future and the current without kind of neglecting the other parts of this that still work? You know what I mean? Like you got to get the balance right, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think deep down, you still need to have that foundation. And that foundation, I think, really does come from SEO because you still need to think about the technical components that helps you be visible from an SEO perspective. So, like schema markups and whatnot, like that's great for SEO. That's also great for AEO because you're showcasing to the bots like the actual value of what you're trying to put out there. So it's really balancing both and seeing them work in conjunction. Because at the end of the day, you might have like the best answers to your audience's questions, but if your site is not indexable or if you don't have pages that are following best practices from an SEO standpoint, you won't be getting any sort of visibility. You won't show up on AI tools, you won't show up on Google search engine result pages. So it's really understanding, still having that kind of education around like SEO, because that's what I feel like is going to help you get the ball rolling with AEO, and kind of putting them both together, not deprioritizing one or the other, but really kind of seeing the value between the two and how they work together and include that into your strategy.
As we wrap up here, I'm kind of curious, what are you excited about for the coming year, kind of in the world of search and marketing?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm actually curious to see how this will all measure up in the end of it all, like how we're really going to start measuring the AI usage and how we're going to start seeing these wins across the board with all this new technology that we're being exposed to. So I'm honestly curious to see the outcome of it all, and if behaviors are going to continue to change, if people are going to get tired of AI and want to go back to like the more of that human level type of interaction. So it's very, I think what I've always been passionate about with SEO is that you're constantly changing in a way. You're having to like adapt to new changes. And AEO brought a definitely new perspective and new changes, new challenges. So I'm just curious to see how this will progress in like 5 years or so and how things will be. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, Hadassah, this has been great. For people that want to learn more about you and find you online, where's the best place for them to do so?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, you can search me up. I know my name is complicated, but it's Hadassah Pegado Dalisay. And yeah, it'd be great to connect with anyone who's also interested in chatting about AEO and just AI and the future of B2B marketing.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Sweet. Thank you.